सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करम्। समस्तजनकल्याणे निरतं करुणामयं नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरम्। Last session we saw about Maya Mayamedam Akhilam Buddhva Brahmapadam Tvam Pravisha Viditva. And knowing all this as Maya, seek that which is permanent, which is Brahman. So a few weeks back, when we had the whole debate about God, so we have to also reach the logical conclusion of that. So we will attempt that today. In this modern age, there is so much which is written about God and so much of information available on God, that God itself must be wondering what all is written. By refuting, the atheist also remembers God, and by believing, the theist also remembers God. So one thing is good, that either ways God is remembered. So now let us approach this topic. First and foremost, why God? Why do you need God? The arguments which are given are: one, to follow morality and ethics. To enforce morality and ethics on the general masses, concept of God has been invented. I am not saying these are the main reasons. I am saying what is the standpoint of the people where they think that why God is required. So one is to enforce morality, that by fear of God I will do what is right, and if I do what is wrong, God will punish me. So one reason God is invented is to enforce morality and ethics. Second reason, I don't know creation from where it came, so God is the default excuse for source of creation, that He is the source of creation. Which is what the scientists and some of these rational minded people argue, saying that we didn't know the source of, we didn't know how lightning was formed, so we said God created lightning. Now we have found how lightning is happening, so God is not required. So that way, as science will keep inventing and discovering things, the laws of nature, God will become redundant. So why was God created? Concept only to explain the inexplicable phenomenon in the creation. Second argument. Third, so many things which are happening all around, I cannot explain that why things happen to people. Most popular question that everybody has: why do good people suffer? I did everything good, why am I suffering? So Bhagwan is the cause. He created this, and He is the one who is writing the destinies of people. So not to take responsibility of my life, I blame it on God. God made it like this. The other day I gave you one example, no? In the early morning when we used to do the class here, and one student could not come. 6:30 we used to have the youth class, and the student could not come on time and managed to come half an hour late. So then when we asked, what happened? So the student said that, I was waiting, no taxi came, so I thought God did not want me to attend the class. But a taxi did not come, so how you are connecting that to God? But that's how one connects. When one doesn't want to take charge of one's life, then blame it on God. So that's the third reason why God is there. Fourth reason is that God is something which is unknown. So whatever is unknown, I blame it on God, saying that God is that. Who is God? How does He create? What are the laws of creation? All that I don't know. There's an unknown factor called God. And so the notion is that we are moving from the known to the unknown. So today I don't know God and I want to know God. I know all this which is manifest. So that factor which is unknown is God, because of whom I am alive, because of whom creation is happening. What is that factor? I don't know. That unknown factor is called as God. So these are the few reasons. There may be many other reasons where people may think that why this concept of God is created. What is the refutation that God does not exist? In the minds of same people, they would say that why do you say that God even exists? First and foremost, one would say that if God exists, evil will not be there. Suffering will not be there. Why should there be so much suffering? If God is there and He is supposed to be almighty, why does suffering exist? The fact that suffering exists means God is not there. How can God allow these things to happen? Two, everything happens by nature. So there is nothing called God. It is all natural phenomenon and laws of the universe, and it will go on as per the laws in the universe, and we have to keep discovering that. So God is not required. And three, if God is there, there will not be partiality. Somebody will not be born with special talent, somebody will not be born as a special child with different abilities. Somebody will not be rich, somebody will not be poor. There will be equality. But there is no equality here. So God is not there. So now different people will talk about this in a different way. First saying that God is an invention of one's own mind, human mind. There is nothing called God. And we saw the reasons why God is not, the concept of God is created. And then what the atheist thinks, that why God is not required. Also because of the notions which exist about God. Please understand that an atheist does not reject God by itself actually. What the atheist rejects is a notion of God. Because one cannot deny an ultimate cause. We will come to what is understanding of God. But what an atheist actually denies is different notions of God which are not appealing. So if one says that God is sitting up there in the heavens controlling the destinies of people, not acceptable. So atheist denies that. If one says that God is this form, this idol, again the atheist will deny that. How can God be this? I don't believe in form. And this is inert. And why are you praying to this? So the form will be denied. The concept of God up there in the heaven is denied. The concept of God controlling the destiny of people is denied. That I don't have freedom and my life is not in my hands is not acceptable. So God is somebody who is controlling it. I don't agree on that. So the atheists to deny these aspects. And when it is forced, that is another reason why the atheist rebels. That you are forced to believe that this is God, and if you don't believe in this God, you are going to suffer. You will go to hell, or these wrong things will happen to you. So if that kind of a force is put, any thinking person who would want freedom of belief will not accept. That why is religion forcing it down my throat? That I don't believe it. Just because it is being forced and I don't like it. So these are different reasons why the whole concept of God is not acceptable, the concept of God is being denied. But what we have to remember is one very important thing here, is that God is or God is not. Both are opinions and both have the same validity. The truth is beyond the opinions. So if an atheist believes that God is not, it is his opinion or her opinion, and that opinion will influence the whole way of life. And the theist who believes that God is also is an opinion, and that will influence his or her way of life. But is God a subject of my opinion? That is something to think about. Whether I believe in God, I don't believe in God, that fact is something else. God is beyond thoughts, beyond opinions, beyond whatever we know as finite, as tangible. But the opinion makes a difference to me in my lifestyle, in my whole approach to life. Hence that opinion is important. But God is not bound by my opinion. Just like any other thing, gravity, I may have an opinion about it. How does it matter? The fact is something else. It is there. I believe it, I don't believe it. It doesn't depend on my belief system. What is. Same way, a person who is open-minded to inquire will come to this understanding of God beyond just intellectual arguments. That's what the Upanishads tell us, that this truth is not attained by intellectualization, just by making it logical arguments or a discussion. What is the truth is something which is very intuitively, one has to experience that. Logic can help, and that's what we are going to do, that to a certain extent how the logic can help us to understand the concept very clearly, and then one has to transcend that concept. So in atheists also, this doesn't apply to atheists only, it applies to any person who is questioning. There are three types of questioners. First type of a questioner is one who is foolish and who is stupid, who doesn't follow any logic, doesn't follow any argument, just is wanting to argue, bas. They don't have their own opinion, but whatever you say is wrong. So that is first type of a person. Second type of a person is a closed person, very strongly holding on to one's own opinion, not willing to open up and understand. See, nothing wrong in being convinced by one's own opinion, but one should be still open. That was the beauty in our culture. That's why we saw in the introduction of Shankaracharya, we saw that how he went around the country holding debates and discussions, Shastrartha, and if somebody's opinion is refuted, that person has the open-mindedness to accept the new idea. It will not create an ego block. So many times it happens that when we give a logical argument, when we give all reasoning, everything, still some people we cannot convince. And so one should not try to convince that person, because that person is closed. Typically what happens is, when we try to convince a person who is closed and that person is not getting convinced, we start doubting our arguments. That should not happen. Simple example for that, why did Ram send Sita to forest? No matter how much you say, people will not accept only. So you should never try to convince the opposite person. So whenever such type of questions come, Guruji always starts like this. He says, I will answer this question to my satisfaction, not to your satisfaction. And then he will give the full answer. Now you want to believe, you don't want to believe, you don't believe. Because my job is not to sit and convince you. I will give exactly what all reasons why this is what I believe, and then it is up to you. So one is a questioner who just blindly, illogically, stupid way keeps questioning. He doesn't want to know the truth. Second is somebody who is closed in his or her own opinion. The third is the open-minded inquirer, somebody who inquires with open mind. So now with an open mind, when we inquire into this whole concept, that what is God exactly? And before we go into what is God, why God is even required? We saw some reasons which are given here. So first and foremost, we start from where we are. Leave aside the concept of God. Whether God exists or not, my question is, do I exist or not? Yes or no? Is there a doubt? On my existence, my meaning, your each one's existence. Do we have a doubt? We don't have a doubt. That I am alive, is there a doubt? No doubt. Is that life force same in all of us or different in all of us? That we don't know. Same?
Yes.
We have learned basic Vedanta, that much we have learned, that body, mind, intellect, vasanas, these are the differences, but that which is infinite can only be one, and that is manifesting in each one of us. So a person can deny the existence of God, but person cannot deny one's own existence. So inquiry of God starts from there. When somebody asked Ramana Maharshi, who is God? A beautiful reply he gave. He said, what is God? Just think. What is? Isness, pure existence or Sat is God. Because you cannot deny that. One cannot deny mud. One can deny pot, pitcher, cup, saucer. But mud you cannot deny, because mud is. One can deny if one wants, one can deny all the concepts of ocean and whatnot. But wave, the water is. He said, what is God. It's a very deep answer. Because at one level, isness is God. And at the other level, the same answer means all this what is divine, is manifestation of the Lord only. All this is God. So existence one cannot deny, that I exist. Body, mind, intellect does not exist in the state of deep sleep, but I exist. That existence is Sat, that existence is called as God. And hence God realization is actually self-realization. To know that pure existence. Ramana Maharshi said that in Upadeshasar, what is that shloka? Atma samsthitihi swatma darshanam Isha darshanam swatma rupataha. Abidance in one's own self is self-realization. And God realization is that. Isha darshanam swatma rupatah. You will experience God in your own heart. So God is not a concept out there. First thing Vedanta tells us is that we always think God is someone out there. That's why we refute. And that's why we have a doubt whether God is or God is not. First thing Vedanta says, no, God is and is in your own heart right now as an immediate experience. That word immediate is very beautiful. Mediate means what? Through a medium what is experienced. Mediate. So all our experiences in life are mediate experiences actually. Through the body, mind, intellect I experience. God is not a mediate experience. Though it is because of that existence, consciousness, bliss that we experience whatever we experience. But that is not experienced by body, mind and intellect. So it is an immediate experience, right here and now, available for me to experience, not some kind of a concept which I will realize at the end of my life or at the end of many, many lives. If I turn my mind and intellect within, right now and here is the experience of God. So other day we saw that there are three valid means of knowledge, and through these if we prove something, it is taken as valid proof, and that concept is proved. So one is called as Shruti, which is scriptures. Second is called our mind is like this. Then Yukti, that is called logic, and Anubhuti, that is experience. This whole understanding of God we will see through these three. So what is the declaration of the scriptures? One, I already told you that existence is God, which is in my own heart actually. Second, scriptures say that God is that infinite reality, Brahman. Why it is said that God is infinite? No beginning, no end. We cannot perceive through the senses. What else? The very understanding of God, why should it be infinite? Why does scripture say that God is infinite?
All the time.
It's beyond space. It's not bound.
No, agreed. Infinite definition is beyond space, unlimited.
It is not
It's beyond anything which is finite.
Yeah, but why is the concept of God equated to infinite is my question. Why can't God be finite? Simple. Just like you and me. Why can't God be finite?
Because there has to be a substandard on which the things keep changing. So there has to be something changeless so that the changes can happen on that.
There has to be a changeless for the changes to happen.
Just is.
But why? That's the whole question. Why? Why it just is? Why is it not something else? Why is it not finite? I mean, some of the answers you have given are valid. We are not saying no. Why should God be infinite? Agreed. Permanent backbone, agreed. But why it has to be permanent? That's all is a simple question.
There has to be answer to all.
If it's finite, it's more like tangible. It's not tangible. I think it's more like towards intangible.
Yeah, but why should it be intangible is the question. If finite is tangible, agreed, but why should God be intangible?
His
Which is what is the difficulty, na? Because God is made intangible and infinite, so we are going in circles, round and round and round. That why? If God was finite, so easy, na? Like that we can comprehend God. But God is not finite. Then that's the difficulty there. So why is God not finite? Why is it called infinite?
Because anything that is finite will have some limitations.
There will be something, there some way something. This is endless and nothing that we can see,
So these two reasons. One is that anything finite has a lot of limitations and it limits the other. We are not looking for one more limited aspect. What we are looking for actually is infinite. And that's why no matter what we achieve, it doesn't satisfy us. Because our quest is for the infinite. And because my nature is infinite as existence, that actually is God. So nothing of the finite can ever satisfy me, because a finite means that which is changing, finite means that which is limited, and finite means that which perishes. If the ultimate cause perishes, how can the effect remain? All this which we are seeing is finite, right? And if we say God also is finite, it is like saying that water is also finite and wave also is finite. So when the wave dies, water should also die. And water dies, but waves exist. That becomes illogical, na? If water also is finite like wave, water can die independent of wave, no? But the relationship is of cause and effect. And that's why it is not, God cannot be finite. So God has to be infinite, and hence the definition of Brahman, or that which is infinite. So the first concept of God is that God is defined as Brahman, that which is the biggest. And what is the biggest? Infinite. Infinite how? Space, time, object. In these three ways it is infinite. It is all pervasive and exists beyond space also, in the state of dream and deep sleep. Beyond time, past, present and future. In fact, the concept of time comes into existence only when mind starts. But this truth exists even beyond the mind in the deep sleep. So it is beyond time, timeless. And it does not have limitation of objects, so it is not finite. So just like this stylus is not the mic is not the iPad is not the iPhone. Each object is limiting the other. God is not one more object by which others are limited and which is limited by others. It is that one thing which is there in all the objects as existence, consciousness and bliss. Hence the definition of God in Vedanta is this. And what does the Shruti say in Taittiriya Upanishad? If you see, the definition is beautifully given in the 3rd chapter of Taittiriya Upanishad. Yato va imani bhutani jayante, from which all the beings arise, yena jatani jivanti, in which all of them sustain, yat prayantyabhisamvishantiti, and they all dissolve in that. Just like thoughts arise in our mind, they stay in the mind, they dissolve in the mind, but the mind remains. Waves arise in the ocean, stay in the ocean, dissolve in the ocean, but the ocean remains. So that way, that substratum of the creation, from where all this arises, in which it stays, into which it goes back, but which still remains. How do we know that? Whatever is happening in the macrocosm is happening in the microcosm. That's the direct proof. If we say that creation is rising in this Lord and staying in this Lord and going back into it, the miniature version of that is happening in our life. How that is happening? I wake up, I do all my actions, I go back to sleep, I go back into dream state, I go back into deep sleep state. So the mind rises, mind stays, mind dissolves. The existence remains as it is. So the same phenomenon is happening outside. And hence the first definition of God is this, that Vedanta says that God is that which is infinite and which is my own nature, not separate. So the remoteness of God, Vedanta removes. God is not some far away concept. God is not something which is finite. God is not something which is inert. So these are various ideas that one has. One is God is far. Second is God is finite. That's why one believes in form, and that's why the atheist rejects that. So one thinks God is far, God is finite, God is inert, some energy, some power. Even today you ask people, now what is God? They will say God is power. You ask them, which power? No, God is power. Mighty power, all powerful. So these notions exist about God, that God is inert, God is finite, God is far, God is a controller. All that Vedanta denies, saying no, that Supreme Brahman does not do anything. As infinite, it cannot do anything. Because there is no incompleteness in that. So what is our understanding of God in Vedanta? Ultimate, this is the absolute truth, what we are talking about. Remember last week we saw 3 levels of truth: absolute truth, relative and transactional. So we are talking about absolute truth. Absolute truth is infinite. Absolute truth is complete. There is no incompleteness in that. One of the main reasons Vedanta says that God is what all of us are seeking, whether we know it or not. Whether we deny the concept of God or accept the concept of God, we are still seeking God only. Why? Because all of us are seeking that which is complete. We don't know it, that's all. Seeker is seeking it consciously in the right place. Others are seeking unconsciously in the wrong place. That's the only difference. Otherwise everybody is seeking the same thing. I want to be Purna, I want to be complete. And no matter what I get from outside, I still remain incomplete. So God is infinite, God is complete. And because we are seeing the creation, we say God is the cause. By itself God is not the cause. That which is infinite cannot be the cause, it cannot produce anything. Because any production means a modification. God cannot produce anything. But because we are not able to relate to that concept right now and we are seeing the creation, so through the creation we are trying to relate. So like looking at the mud pot, then what I would understand, that there is something called mud. Looking at the waves, I will understand that there is something called ocean and the water. So from the effect, I am trying to decipher the cause. So from that effect standpoint, we say God is the cause of the universe. And hence the definition is from where all the beings arise, in which they stay, into which it goes back. God is that which is consciousness. It is not inert power. So this is what the scriptural declaration is, that this is Brahman, that there is an absolute truth called as Brahman, and that Brahman is infinite, it is complete, it is the ultimate cause of the universe. In fact, to make it more clear, we should say it is the causeless cause. There is no cause for this truth. Otherwise it will go in infinite regress. That which is the ultimate cause of the whole universe is this Brahman, and it is of the nature of consciousness. Why do we say it is of the nature of consciousness? Why can't God be inert? Why can't God be inert? Earlier question was why God has to be infinite. Now the next question is why God can't be inert. Dynamic activity, inert things also will do. That fan is moving very dynamically. There's something else. You are close to the answer.
Inert can't manifest in many.
Hey, inert can also manifest in many forms. Ocean is inert. What and how many waves are coming out of that? Inert can manifest in many forms. There's nothing wrong in that.
Body is also inert.
Body may be inert, so what? What is the point?
So while that movement to the inner dynamic conscious activity and consciousness,
That's what I'm saying, not required. Electricity is inert and the fan is moving. Inert can create dynamism and make the inert move. Why a sentient force is required? Why do we say God is finite?
but there is no intelligence in that movement.
Okay.
It's been operated by someone else.
So one is okay, there is no intelligence, and we see a lot of intelligence all around us. Why not that intelligence also is a product of inert? The example in our olden days given is that green betel leaf and that brown supari and that white chuna. You bring this together, one red color will be produced. So you bring matter in a certain combination, intelligence is created.
Inert objects cannot lead to consciousness.
Okay, so inert can't lead to consciousness. But how does it answer that why God is not inert?
Because even the intelligence
You are there, but just explain it little further.
to bring the three, the nine, the betel leaf and the tuna and the katha, even for that, to bring them together also intelligence is required.
Right, so one is to, even for that inert to combine, there has to be a sentient force, okay?
So every
Acceptable answer.
object has consciousness in some or the other form. So because the objects which are created has consciousness,
Something which
something which
has
has created that cannot be inert.
So the main reason is that when we see the effects, we see the manifestation of life in everything, and even in the inert, we don't see the expression of life because that mind is not there. But the effect also, everywhere in the effect you see consciousness is there. So if in the effects everywhere there is consciousness, cause there has to be consciousness. Conscious can manifest as inert and sentient or conscious, both. But inert cannot manifest as conscious. Inert can only manifest as inert. So this mic can become something else which is inert, but the mic cannot become conscious. But consciousness can manifest as something which is either inert or conscious, both. Like the waker's mind can produce a hill or a river in the dream which is inert, and it can produce beings also, live, which are alive. That's why we say that Guru Stotram, Akhanda Mandalakaram Vyaptam Yena Chara Achara, moving, non-moving, meaning sentient and insentient, both. Hence we say that God is of the nature of consciousness. So this is the understanding of God in Vedanta, that God is that which is Brahman, which is the supreme, which is the absolute, of the nature of infinity, of the nature of consciousness, of the nature of completeness, of the nature of existence. Now that God by itself cannot create, but yet we see the creation. So that is where that concept comes, that Brahman, using the power of Maya, becomes Ishvara. Now this Brahman is infinite, nameless, formless, attributeless, causeless, effectless, all. But we are seeing the creation still. So last 2 sessions we have seen that why this concept of Maya is brought in, that power of Brahman, because of which the truth is veiled and something else is projected, that is called as Maya. Why do we say that there is a power called Maya? In Vedanta we question everything, so that we have clarity. There is no assumptions in Vedanta. How can you say that there is a power called Maya? So that we saw again that we are seeing the effects of Maya, the 3 gunas, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. When we see Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, then we understand that there has to be a power called Maya. You can call it whatever name you want. This power of Maya is what people called as nature. That nature is God. Why? Because one has to accept that there is a power. That one cannot deny. But does this power function on its own? It doesn't function on its own. No power can function on its own. For every power there has to be a locus. Like I have a power to talk. That power to talk resides in me. Does it reside independent? No. Every power has to have a locus from where it originates. So this whole universe, we see creation which is there, and we see Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, and we see so many things which are happening here. And as some of you said, that to bring these things together, there is some intelligent factor which is required. It is not just material. Any creation will have these 3 aspects. No? It will have material cause, it will have an intelligent cause, and it will have an instrumental cause. So if we say that all this is being run by nature, we are only accepting 2 causes, that is the instrumental and the material cause. But how is it happening? How is it that 2 molecules of hydrogen have to mix with 1 molecule of oxygen and then water is formed? Instrumental cause, intelligent cause and material cause. So looking at all these, we say that yes, there is a power of Maya, and that power of Maya, can it be independent? Why it cannot be independent? So, correct. So one is it requires locus to function. Any other reason?
Maya itself is not. Maya
That
itself
intelligence is required.
their intelligence is not.
Sattva is the intelligence, na, in Maya.
That itself is enough.
Maya is a power. Sattva, Rajas and Tamas are there in that as the qualities.
Something that's making it manifest. There has to be something behind it.
Something which has to be behind it. That is the locus. It has to be intelligence. One more reason is because if Brahman is infinite, Maya cannot be outside that Brahman. It has to be power of Brahman. Na? Infinite means what? Everything. If Maya becomes a separate power, then Maya is finite, Brahman is finite, both will be perishable. So that power of Maya is what Brahman assumes or uses and becomes Ishvara. Now why is this concept of Ishvara required? Why we cannot directly use Brahman? Because Brahman by itself is nameless, formless, attributeless, causeless, effectless. But we are seeing cause and effect, everything. And hence we say that this Ishvara is the creator of the universe. Now what is important here to understand is that this creation of this Ishvara is not like the potter sitting and making a pot. That potter is separate, mud is separate, wheel is separate, and potter uses all this to make the pot. Because in that all the causes are finite. Here Ishvara is nothing but Brahman only, please remember. So what will be the material cause? Material cause, Ishvara will say, Ishvara will create. So the 5 elements become the material cause. But what are these 5 elements actually? Nothing. From where are they created? From within. Ishvara manifests these 5 elements from within. Just like the spider creates the web from its own self. Mundakopanishad gives us that beautiful analogy. Yathornanabhi srijate. Urnanabhi means a spider. So how a spider creates from itself, in that same way this supreme truth manifests all the 5 elements from itself, because there cannot be something outside it, because it's infinite.
Is it, some people ask that what about who created Brahma? How do we answer that?
And that's why we said that which is infinite cannot be created by anything.
It becomes a theory, does it not?
It is not a theory. Infinity is not a product subject to change. Even in mathematics you take it. Infinity is that which encompasses everything in it. Nothing is outside it. So there is no question of somebody else creating infinity, because if somebody else creates infinity, it will become finite.
That's an assumption which we go by. How do we prove that?
That's the understanding. How do we prove that? The proof of that is your own self. That's why I said forget outside. In your own self, that there is that pure existence which remains. Even when that isness remains, even when everything else disappears, isness still remains all the time. So that infinity is of the nature of changelessness. So in me, what is that which is changeless? Is Satchidananda, is remaining. Ishvara is infinite only. That's why I said Ishvara is nothing but Brahman. Just using the power of Maya. Like right now, you are using the power of listening. You are the same person. Because you are using the power of listening, you have become a listener. Right? So they are not two different things. Please remember, Ishvara and Brahman is one only. Just that when the Ishvara is using the power of Maya, Brahman using the power of Maya becomes Ishvara, the doer. Because Brahman is not the doer. And we are seeing the effect here. So who created this? It definitely cannot be nature which created, because nature by itself is inert, that we saw. And it definitely cannot be Brahman which created. So we say that there is an Ishvara. And it is a fact that there is an Ishvara. It is not a concept, please remember. Because you see the impact of Ishvara all around.
The instrument you're referring to in this creation is Ishvara.
No.
What is the instrument?
That's the beauty. Now think, who is this Ishvara? In the 3 causes, who is Ishvara? Material cause is what? Appears to be 5 elements. That's what science is saying. Atom created all this, and try to find further deeper into it. Atom, subatomic particles, quark, string, all that keeps going down, down, down. But all that is what? Jada vastu only. It's all inert only. So the material cause apparently is 5 elements, but 5 elements came from where? Ishvara. Ishvara is the material cause. What is the instrument with which Ishvara created? Mind. Maya. Ishvara. So its own self. So Ishvara only is the instrumental cause also. And what is the intelligence cause? Ishvara only.
Just like spider.
All the three causes are one. In the aspect of creation, all the three causes are one. There cannot be something else. Which means two beautiful points. Where all the causes come together, first point is all this is divine. Because this is all Ishvara only. Hence we worship all this as the Lord. Anything is divine for us, anything. We don't bother whether it is inert or sentient. Because this is all manifestation of Ishvara. That's why we say Sahasra Shirsha Purushaha Sahasraksha Sahasrapat. He has 1,000 eyes, 1,000 heads, 1,000 ears. Meaning every eye is his eye, every ear is his ear. He is all this. So the Vedic hymn is that. So one truth is that Ishvara only is all this. So God and creation are one. Brahman and Ishvara are one, we saw. God and creation also are one. And the second deeper point is, where all the three causes come together, it is an illusion. It is an illusion. Doesn't matter, you listen to it today, because this is concentrated dose of philosophy you are getting, you listen to it 4-5 times if you want later. Because this won't come out again. Because a lot of background has to be built for this. So whatever is, anyway, that point about illusion we have spoken last class, so I won't go much into the depth of it. But that point to understand is that Ishvara is the cause of the whole universe and manifests as all the whole universe. And that's why we say God did not create the world. We always say God manifested as the world. There's a big difference. In some of the other religions, they will say God created the world, and hence we oppose it, saying, why the hell God created the world and who is he to control my life? We say no, God only manifested as this world. Even in our culture, people say that Bhagwan created all this for his Leela and we are suffering in this. Because one doesn't understand that you are that God who is suffering and who is going through all the results. God is not somebody sitting up there and pushing you, ki abhi you suffer. And I am the creator, I am sitting separately. No, he has only become all this. So anyway, this Ishvara is the concept of Ishvara in our culture is totality. So all this is Ishvara, what we see. But Ishvara is not limited to this. Ishvara is much more than this, because we saw Ishvara is that Brahman. So this Ishvara has a few attributes. First and foremost, Ishvara is compassionate. Second, this Ishvara is all powerful. So Sanskrit word for compassionate is Kripalu. All powerful is Sarva Shaktiman. All pervasive is Sarva Vyapi, and all knowing, Sarvagnya. Now why do we say Ishvara is all these? Because being the cause, Ishvara only is manifesting as all these. So Ishvara is all pervasive. Ishvara is all knowing because it is of the nature of knowledge, consciousness. All powerful. Because everything else is only an amsha of this Ishvara. Is a, what you say, is a small manifestation. That which is like the ocean is all powerful. However big a wave may be, it is limited. All powerful is the ocean. So now this concept of Ishvara is what a person can relate to and derive a lot of strength. So when I know that Ishvara is all powerful and that Ishvara is in my own heart with me all the time, I will never feel weak because Bhagwan is with me all the time. We don't understand that because we don't understand the concept of God properly, and we don't feel that God is with me because we are stuck in our own little world, in our own little ego. Then we feel lonely and weak sometimes. But a devotee who knows this all the time, that God is with me at all times, not only as consciousness within my heart, but as the Ishvara who is the creator of the universe, every moment, just like the ocean is related to the wave, every moment is connected. In that same way, the Lord is connected to me all the time, and I can experience the presence of that Lord in my own life. Through all this which is happening around me, how is it happening? By the grace of the Lord only it is happening.
Why do people do bad things in life?
We'll come to that. Because the mind is impure, no? That's all. Petrol is there in the car, why accident happens? Petrol causes the accident. Accident is caused because the person is drunk or not able to see clearly or whatever.
Here we are saying that Maya is part of Ishvara only. Then why is Maya having the dominant role?
Maya is not having the dominant role.
It's Maya.
I am Ishvara. One of the concepts in our Vedanta is very clear that Ishvara is the creator, but Ishvara is not the controller for human beings. Please remember. There is the free will, which is why the answer to all these questions that if God is of the nature of absolute good, how can there be evil in the society? The evil is not because of God. The evil is created because of the human mind free will and selfishness. The mind which forgets its own nature as completeness becomes lonely, and then to fill that loneliness will do anything. So anyway,
You made a statement just as the ocean is connected to the wave, similarly God is connected to me all the time.
yeah,
But wave is the ocean. So similarly,
you are divine.
the God, yeah, we should take
In your essential nature you are. Exactly, that's what Vedanta is saying.
Why would we create that duality that God is with me? Why not that I am that nature?
But if you are able to live that, this discussion is not required. Khatam na baat. If I can live, please remember, you meaning not Pranav, you meaning not you. If I can identify with that, this discussion only is irrelevant. Because I am at the Jiva level, I have to know that there is one Ishvara and that Ishvara is always with me. And we will come to that. 3 levels of relationships are there with the Ishvara also. In the beginning you say different. Now I am different, God is different. Everybody starts with that. Because I am identified with the body. Then identified with the mind, I say I am a part, God is the whole. And then identified with the absolute, then we say I am that. That's what is Advaita, Vishishtadvaita and Dvaita. These are different levels of relationship with God. So that's the journey of evolution. But when you come up there, other two become irrelevant. There is no question of with God, inside me, outside me. I am God, full stop.
Where is the free will and the selfishness in the human being coming from?
Mind and intellect has been given that power. As long as you are having a human body, you have that power to think, to... This power is power of Ishvara only. There are 3 powers in Ishvara, na? Ichha Shakti, Kriya Shakti, Gyan Shakti, because of which the whole creation happens. That power is manifesting in me also. So Ishvara manifests not only in me as the life, consciousness or Brahman manifests as life. When we say Ishvara is with me all the time, Ishvara is with me all the time, even in this sense that I also have these 3 powers. I have the power to have the knowledge, I have the power to desire based on my knowledge, and then I have the power to act to fulfill my desires. These 3 powers I have, which are my free will. In this, Kriya Shakti is there with all the beings, animals, plants, all of them. But Ichha Shakti and Jnana Shakti, not there. Ichha Shakti also is there with animals, but it is not conscious. It's instinctively it is there. So in us there is Ichha Shakti, Kriya Shakti, Jnana Shakti. That's the manifestation of Ishvara in us. And that is what we use in positive ways, negative ways, and we create all this. So Ishvara, all powerful, gives me security. All pervasive, meaning everything is divine. I do not insult anything, I do not abuse anything. All knowing. Because being that ultimate cause of the whole universe is Antaryami, inside me, outside me, knows everything. Complete surrender comes about when I know that Ishvara is all knowing. I don't even have to ask anything. Just like the parent knows all the time what the child needs. Child may not even have to ask actually. Of course that example has a limitation, but that's the tuning. That's how so when I know that Ishvara is all knowing, in that state of surrender, one doesn't even need to pray actually. What we do is, if Bhagavan knows everything, why should I pray? Simply intellectually we think like that and we don't pray. But did that bring about the surrender that Bhagavan knows everything, so I follow whatever happens, I accept it as his will. That has to happen.
But what is the real purpose of all this creation then? I mean, starting at a point and kind of...
There is no purpose of creation, honestly. What is the purpose of your dream, you tell me? Nothing. Wake up.
Is it like a test that you...
If I give you a purpose of creation, will you accept that? Suppose I say purpose of creation is evolution. Suppose I say purpose of creation is recreation. Purpose of creation is expression of creativity. I can give 100 purposes, but will anybody be able to accept it? And how will I know that that's the real purpose? It's only intellectual quest. So, but we need a certain intellectually satisfying answer so that we are able to live sanely in this insane world. So we say, okay, the purpose of creation is evolution. You have come here, you evolve from human to divine, because that's the best purpose I can say, so that we wake up. When we evolve and we start thinking, what is this evolution and human to divine, did I ever become undivine, all that we come to, when you wake up, then you realize that the whole question only was not there because the whole world only was not there. But being in this world, at this point in time, that quest is natural. The mind will ask the question, intellect will ask the question, why this whole thing? So one cannot answer why actually. Even science cannot answer why. To a certain extent some answer can be given, but actual why cannot be answered. So the point is, coming back here, Ishvara is compassionate, all-knowing, all-powerful, all-pervasive. And that Ishvara, who is the creator of this whole universe, is also Karma Adhyaksha. Now Karma Adhyaksha means what? One who presides over our karma, does not control our karma. Very compassionate, because if the Lord went only by our karma, we would never go higher in evolution. Because when we go by the theory of evolution, when we understand this fact that we have come from the animalistic realms into the human realm. So when we come to human realm, it is the same mind which I am carrying. And it is not possible for that mind suddenly to start following virtues, values, good, bad, all that. So one will do a lot of negative things, wrong karma, selfishness is there. Because in the realm of the animals, the law is survival of the fittest. I have to be, to protect myself, I have to be obsessed with myself. Not obsessed, what is the word? I have to be preoccupied with myself. Otherwise I will be finished. So that tendency continues. Self-preservation instinct, that is actually. That's the word, self-preservation instinct. That continues. So I will do things which are insensitive, I will harm people, I may land up, hurting, doing wrong things. If I was given only the karma phala of my karma, it would be very, very tough. We can't get satsang only in our life. Just think about it. How will we get satsang? Hence we say that Ishvara is all compassionate. That is one aspect. Second aspect is Ishvara doesn't see whether you are good, you are bad.
Like sun.
Yeah, so like the sun, the example is given like that the grace of the Lord is on everybody. That's the compassion. It doesn't choose. But only these are devotees, on him only I will shower the grace. They are invoking special grace if they are able to surrender, tune up. But general grace is there on everybody. Hence the compassion of Ishvara. So this Ishvara only is the karma adhyaksha, meaning he gives us the capacity to do action. In the animals and plants, Ishvara is a controller. But in the human being, Ishvara doesn't control. Ishvara has given the buddhi to us and then given the free will. So that karma adhyaksha, Ishvara also has created the laws of karma. Along with free will which is there in our mind, in intellect, the law of karma, I am talking about the subjective realm here. Same way the laws outside in the nature also. So both inside and outside the laws are created by Ishvara, the cause, the creator. Just like the director controls the whole movie. The director will tell the script writer, this is the story, this is the dialogue, this is how you have to put it. The person will write and then the actor has to act. So that way Ishvara created the law of karma. Why do we say Ishvara created law of karma? Because we are seeing that manifesting. That as you sow, so you reap. In a limited context, at least we can understand that. How? Somebody who constantly is thinking about being a doctor becomes a doctor. I did not think about being a doctor, so I am not a doctor. So as you sow, so you reap. Now in the big matrix of karma, then certain things which I desire are not happening, etc. That's a different point altogether. That is because many things are combined together, lots of lives come together, and that's a bigger picture. But in a smaller picture I can understand that. Okay, there is the law of karma which is operating, which is the law of cause and effect. Even outside, if I sow an apple seed, I will only get a apple. Because the cause is the seed and the fruit is the effect. So I see the effect, I see the operation of law of cause and effect. So Ishvara is the one who created law of karma. Why do we say Ishvara only created? Why not it is a law working on its own? Because just like that power we spoke about, same way law also has to be created by a sentient entity, enforced by a sentient entity. It cannot function otherwise. Inert, which does not have intelligence, which does not have sentiency, is not capable of creating a system. Think about it. System is always created by a sentient force. A sentient force can create a robot, and there can be systems in that robot. But a robot will not be able to create its own systems. Robot can be programmed by a sentient person to create systems in another robot or anything else. But that's because a sentient force has done that. Same way, if I am seeing the laws functioning all around me, there has to be a sentient power which has created these laws, which is enforcing law. Even in our country and everywhere you see, there has to be a law enforcement authority. If the law enforcement authority is not there, that's a different matter. In our country, law enforcement it doesn't even happen. So Ishvara is the karma adhyaksha, Ishvara is the creator of law of karma, and Ishvara is karma phala data. Now always remember that Ishvara only gives the result according to our action. That's why we said Ishvara doesn't control our karma. Ishvara presides over our karma. Presides meaning there is a presence of life in me because of which the body, mind, intellect are functioning. And the Lord is taking care of the efficient functioning of this equipment. Now what I do with that equipment is my choice. Based on my karma, I get the karma phala. A simple law of cause and effect which he will implement. That's why Gurudev always said that you are the architect of your life, and by your thoughts and desires you are giving the blueprint of your life. Ishvara is only the contractor who is executing that plan. If you say I want a bathroom here, he will put a bathroom there, full stop. Ishvara is not controlling our lives as human beings. Ishvara doesn't control. So Ishvara is the karma phala data, and that is why it is important for me to know the laws of karma, so that I can align myself. Not only laws of karma, law in the nature also I should know. That because of science we are discovering, and we are able to tune up our life more and more according to those laws outside. But because we are not in tune with the laws inside, then you see all the stress, worry, depression, all the anxieties, all that happening.
Swamiji, when did the law of karma start?
So when did the law of karma start cannot be answered in particular point in time, that in 20,000 BC it started. Not like that, but the law of karma operates from the first human birth.
So just let's take an example. There are two human beings. One person has done something bad to the other. What did the second person deserve to get that back?
It does. It's not necessary that that person has to deserve because of some past karma. It can be a new karma also, no? Which is creating. In that life he is creating, no? Then it will go on. So that's the difficulty to know which is a effect of past karma and which is a new karma. And that's not required to know actually. If I live alert in this life, in tune with this laws, that selfishness binds, selflessness liberates and all that, then I am clearing myself and having the exit out. One doesn't have to bother which is a past karma, which is present karma. Who bothers? Do you sit and bother what did I eat on 15th August 2013? No, the effect of that is I am what I am right now. Of so many years of my eating, I have diabetes now, or I have cholesterol now, or I have good health and I am free from all this. All that is the effect of all that. Now what is important is not to dig into what I ate and what I didn't eat. What is important is how do I proceed from now. That. They evolve by instinct, by the natural push of nature. So that's why that theory of evolution comes, na? That amoeba will become this and then it will become this and that will go on. It does not have a conscious desire to, like a fish doesn't want to become a amphibian. But in the nature scheme, fish will become amphibian, amphibian will become reptile, reptile will become, so it will go on.
Swamiji, even if you have good karma to exhaust, you have to take birth?
100%. That's why we say that punya vivarjita pantha, go beyond good and bad. Because the moment you are the doer, you are the enjoyer. So if you are good karma also, you are enjoyer, no? But better it is to do good karma than to do bad karma. So two aspects we have seen today. One is concept of Brahman, other is the concept of Ishvara. And this Ishvara, that's why we say that the popular saying, man proposes and God disposes, is a myth. The saying actually should be man proposes and God executes. That's all. As per our plan, you give that plan, God executes it. God is not going to ask you why you did this. No. Petrol doesn't ask. You want to go and bang the car, you go bang the car. Now what to do? You want to reach the destination, you reach the destination. Petrol is there, full stop. In that same way, the Lord has given us free will. He has created the karma, laws of karma. He has given us the right field. Now it is up to us how we utilize. Now whatever we do, He will just give the result of that. He gave us the knowledge also. He gives us the opportunity also to gain that knowledge. All of us are sitting here by grace of Ishvara only. So many factors have to come together for one experience to happen. That is the grace of Ishvara only. Prompted by your karma, you are sitting here. So many people had joined Bhajgovindam class. You are the lucky few to survive. And I don't know after today's class how many of you will still survive. That is your karma and grace of God. Whether you survive or not, both the ways it will be grace only, don't worry. But the point is that God doesn't dispose of anything. Because if God does that, God loses the status of Ishvara. Then it becomes like any other finite creature that works on whims and fancies, works on one's own attachments and preferences. So one of the qualities of Ishvara is that Ishvara is impartial. And Bhagavan says that in the Gita, Samoham sarva bhuteshu, I am equal to all beings. He doesn't even say human beings. I am equal to all beings. Name dveshyosti na priya. There is nobody who is extremely dear to me, nobody I hate. Just like the sun cannot hate anybody, doesn't love anybody. It is there, it does the duty. So these two concepts for today you understand, and next class we will do a little more. That same Ishvara, how it comes down into the as the form, personal God, and why that form is required. And that Devta. Three aspects we have to still do that will end this topic. That is, what is the concept of personal God? What is the concept of this 33 crore Devtas? And what is this Kul Devi and Devta? With that, this whole concept will end.
So Swamiji, there is a concept of Devta, then Asur and all, that also heaven and hell.
Yeah.
It is.
Consciousness is awareness.
Same. Consciousness is equal to awareness. Is the same thing.
Swamiji, can you just throw a little bit light on this one when you said the three causes, the instrumental, the intellectual and...
Not intellectual. Intelligence.
Material cause, when they all come together, it's an illusion.
Yeah.
Can you just throw a little light on that?
Okay, so I didn't throw light on it because somebody said Sunday morning it is. So So the point is that when these three come together, that creation is an illusion. Because, the example given for that is the dream. In the dream, the intelligence cause is my own mind. Efficient cause, instrumental cause also is my own mind. And instrumental cause also is my own mind. So where all the three come together, that dream will appear very real, but actually it is an illusion. Yeah. Same way this creation. So actually if you think about it, all of us are in the dream of Ishvara. Okay. We are in the, we are in the dream of Ishvara, but remember we are Ishvara. Because everything in the dream is Ishvara. Otherwise again you will say, I am in the dream of that Ishvara and why the hell am I suffering because that fellow is dreaming. I am only that Ishvara who is dreaming. That is what I have to realize. And you want to get still complicated, then yes, in the dream of Ishvara I have created my own dream. That is called samsara. Ishvara's dream is Jagat. In that dream I have created my own dream. That is called as samsara.
Swamiji, we are thinking that we are different characters of that day.
Yeah.
But in that we have created our own.
I was asking Swamiji that we've used words like intelligence, logic, free will. The Shrutis have never been questioned, or they can never be questioned, or they have been questioned inadequately.
Shrutis are completely open to questioning. And in fact, Shruti is nothing but the result of so much of questioning and the answers which have come out because of that.
Not for me, I can't question.
Your Shruti is very different.
We laid out the question.
Law of the jungle.
Okay, so please upload this as soon as possible because I will not be responsible for any confusion that happens in your mind and outside in the life of yours. So please upload it, so if there is any confusion they have, they can see it again. Thank you. It will be heavy. Because that concept of God, if you want to understand, you have to understand its depth fully.
Swamiji, we've basically done Shruti and Yukti today. We've done.
Yeah, we have done Shruti and Yukti. Anubhuti. Anubhuti is very simple. The very fact that I exist means that there has to be a cause. No? The very fact that this tube light is there, that means there has to be a power station somewhere. That is one. Second, in my own body I see that. How is this whole body functioning? In my mind I see it as Ichha Shakti, Kriya Shakti, Gyan Shakti. Anubhuti of so many saints is there. People who have had actually darshan of the Lord. So Anubhuti is also over today. Shruti over, Yukti over, Anubhuti over. Logic. Yukti means the logic. Yeah. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Okay, I want to leave you with one puzzle. Not puzzle, riddle. You have to think about it and get me the answer next week. I don't know if I shared this with you earlier. No, not that 17. That is very simple. If I have shared it when some of you have heard it in my earlier talk, then keep quiet. Don't give the answer to others because the idea is they should think. So there is this ant which is going around everywhere very, frantically searching something. And they say, what happened? What are you searching? He said, I want to find out where is that elephant. So he said, hey, elephant. We saw the elephant in the pool there. So he said, oh, in the lake. So that ant goes there and finds that the elephant is taking bath there. So that ant shouts, you elephant, come out! I said, what happened? I just tell you, you come out now. So that elephant says, okay. Ant cannot be questioned. Elephant comes out. Then ant looks at the elephant, goes around the elephant, stands in front of the elephant and say, go. So the elephant says, hello, what happened? He says, no, I lost my swimsuit, so I was just thinking that you may have stolen it. Now that's the story. Now you think, what does that mean?